Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Maintaining the IT Transformation Momentum, sponsored by Leidos on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Angie Heisey, the Civil Group President for Leidos, David Shive, the Chief Information Officer at the General Services Administration, Rod Turk, the Acting CIO at the Commerce Department, and Margie Graves, the Acting Federal Chief Information Officer. We spent a lot of time talking at the very high level, if you will, the 50,000-foot view of IT transformation. Let's just go to the next level down, maybe the 25,000-foot view. And let me start with Angie. A lot of times agencies will come to a company like Leidos, or Leidos will go to them and say, okay, you got to transform, we all know that. How do you do it? Where do you start? And then that's when we start talking about things like Agile and Cloud and data analytics and the importance of those. Talk a little bit about what agencies maybe should keep in mind and what you're seeing from your customers in each of those areas, or just pick one.
Yeah, so let's talk about cloud a little bit, because a lot of times you hear cloud and all the cybersecurity concerns about it. But one of the things that we've been encouraging our clients to look at more from a cloud perspective is how they can make that a discriminator from a security perspective. So really build up their resiliency and their disaster recovery capabilities by moving to the cloud. We see it in the commercial space significantly, and we see a lot of federal clients moving that. The idea of being able to rebuild your entire enterprise or many of your critical assets in a matter of a couple of hours is a real discriminator when it comes from a resiliency and disaster recovery perspective.
Many times people don't think about that piece of it, right? It's, well, if I can move this to the cloud, is maybe we can save money or become more efficient or serve citizens better. But that recovery piece, the resiliency piece is huge, right? If it goes down, it's go ahead.
Significant, especially with a lot of adversaries nowadays really focusing attacks on a lot of times backup systems first, right? And then the operational systems. It could be something that honestly can save your organization.
Now, Dave, let me turn to you maybe for a second, because you get the dual hat, right? You're the CIO at GSA, but you also sit on the Cloud Security Board, the JAB, the Joint Advisory Board. I get authorization. Authorization for FedRAMP, the Cloud Security Program. Talk a little bit about what you heard from Angie, a little bit about this idea of the cloud fits into this transformation piece, and then the security piece that wraps around it.
Just like in the commercial space, and just like our citizens expect, the business of GSA, just like the business that our citizens do every single day, doesn't sit within four walls. It is a worldwide or nationwide thing, and having computing and operations take place within four walls, it's so 19th century. So, so when we moved to the cloud, that was one of the primary reasons. So the business of GSA could take place any place, anytime, on any device, in a highly secure environment, in a highly secure way. That's one of the great benefits. And another is, just like Angie said, disaster recovery. I used to spend over $1 million a year doing business continuity, planning and testing and activities. I don't have to do that anymore. That happens every single day. We take simple outages and turn those into our business continuity and planning exercises every single year. So there's massive benefit to doing this. When you expand the compute out beyond your four walls, and you expand the use of that compute out beyond the four walls, it makes it so that we're operating just like citizens do every single day with their technology now.
Angie, is that a huge selling point, what Dave just said? Listen, I used to spend $1 million a year. Now it's $1 million. Your budget's $50 million or whatever it is. But still, if you could use that $1 million for mission, wow, what a difference that could make. Are you seeing customers understanding that that's a critical benefit of the cloud?
It absolutely is. Not only the savings, but then the movement of risk relative to cybersecurity, and I think Margie talked about the NIST framework, but being able to mitigate your risk in a way that also helps you transform your environment is pretty powerful.
Margie, from OMB's perspective, as you talk to Rod and Dave and other CIOs and other executives in the departments and agencies about risk, where does that bring in understanding not just the cloud piece, but Agile deals with risk, data analytics, understanding your data deals with risk. Talk a little bit about that risk piece and how it kind of spreads across the IT transformation.
Well, it's really a key element, and it is in the following manner. The expectation is that people should be able to experiment, and to be able to learn, and to be able to improve as they're going through these short cycles of delivery. And the ability to do that ultimately results in a much better product. It also includes the user in the equation. So the ability to be able to accept a certain amount of risk as you're going through the process is absolutely critical to fostering an environment of innovation and of forward-leaning kinds of approaches to the missions that we deliver today. I think it's important to also focus on the fact that you need to be a good customer. We always talk about you need to be a good vendor, but in the expectation area, we ought to put the light right back on ourselves and say we need to understand our environments, we need to understand our data layer, we need to be able to operate at the data layer and pull it back from the applications that we have today. And from a cybersecurity standpoint, that is huge because we may ultimately, as we look to the future, be working in that realm as data moves across internet as transport. And we won't be relying on hardware, we'll be relying on software-based solutions to actually secure our environments. And when we're looking at that kind of a future, it's all that much more important that you understand your baselines and your current environment, like you've just been saying throughout this program. Being a good customer requires that you know that I have things that are cloud ready, and I'm just going to go do those. I have things that are really, could be cloud ready if I go through the following steps and I prepare them as such. And then I have things that are really gnarly, and I just need to start peeling off layers in those environments to understand when I get down to the core, and then I may have to do some refactoring, but I will reduce the amount of refactoring I have to do if I do those other things first.
So Rod, what does your whiteboard look like? Do you have the gnarly, the could be ready, and definitely are ready
Well, we've definitely
list?
got the gnarly, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Cybersecurity CISO hat for just a moment, because I absolutely agree with Margie in terms of the cybersecurity aspects of this. And what I've found is sometimes the more you change, the more things don't change, really. Because when we take a look at moving to the cloud, moving to different services outside of our normal environment, you have to look at the boundaries. So what I mean by that is, what is the boundary between what is the responsibility of the federal government versus the contractor or the cloud or any other service that you might, so that the boundary then is well defined, so that there's things that cybersecurity issues that don't fall off the table as they traverse the boundary. I've seen those kinds of risks appear in some cloud-based kinds of excursions that we've gone on. I think it's also critical that we keep track of the data as we move more towards a digital type of economy and a digital process. I mean, let's face it, the millennials today, the youngsters today, I guess, since I'm a little long in the tooth here, they are used to having tremendous computing power in their hands. When I first got into IT, I was amazed by this bank of Winchester drives, 5 megabytes each one, a bank that went on forever, not even a gig's worth of storage, but yet you can put terabytes in your hands these days. So we have to look to the future to see what our customers are going to want, and they're going to want that computing power in their hands at a moment's notice, 24/7, 365. And having a knowledge of what your architecture is, putting your cybersecurity in place so that the data that you have is protected, and that you enable then, as a cybersecurity practitioner, you enable your customers to be able to do what they need to do in that kind of an environment. I think that's what we need to be looking for in the future.
And that goes back, I think, Dave, to this idea of user-centered design, user experience, and it goes back to this idea of why incremental works, and agencies and other organizations are moving in that direction, because, well, if we don't meet what the user's needs are and we put something out there, no one's going to use it, we've failed in two senses. So you guys are all into Agile. You mentioned that earlier. Talk a little bit about how you're using it to kind of ensure doing what Rod just kind of mentioned about you meeting users' needs and keeping people engaged in the right way.
Right. You can ignore everything I've said so far today if you just get this one point. So Agile, if done wrong, can be a very dangerous thing. What it does is it allows you to rapidly deliver bad stuff if you do it wrong. So you have to develop the right muscles inside, and the good practices necessary to deliver rapidly, recognizing the risks associated with delivering rapidly. So you do smart things. I'll get very specific here. You make sure when you're developing your list of sprints to deliver that you keep the delivery time horizons very short, so that if you're delivering in the wrong direction, you can pivot back to the right direction very quickly. When you develop your list of deliverables, you don't have only delivery sprints in there. You're very specific about saying we're going to have a technical debt recovery sprint built into that period. Where you're not delivering any product that has to be okay with your consumers. You drive in also a security sprint, so you have periodic reviews of what you're doing and make sure that security is of equal importance to delivering product, shipping product to your customer. That's a good thing for your customers to hear. It helps them become better consumers of the technology that you're providing.
Angie, are you starting to see that request from agencies for that Agile, for delivery, or are you still getting maybe a little too many waterfall type of RFPs?
I will say most of our clients probably have moved to Agile over the years, and we're fortunate that we have a large group of software developers that are very adept and trained in Agile methodology and experienced, to kind of Dave's point of making sure that we stay aligned with the key stakeholders' requirements and intent, and that we can make adjustments along the way with those stakeholders.
But as Margie said, you got to be good customers too, right? So Margie, how are you ensuring Dave's a good customer or Rod's a good customer from an O&B perspective? So we're going to go 50,000 foot again, because you can't micromanage them. I know that.
Well, I think we have a very effective working CIO council where we discuss these topics, and everybody puts their ideas on the table, and then ultimately informs the kind of policy and guidance that comes out of O&B. Because our ultimate goal here is for every piece of policy and every bit of guidance to actually help agencies get to where they're going. That hasn't always been a success. We're going through our policy compendium right now to get some of the less effective elements out of the equation. Meanwhile, we need to make sure that we have those conversations, that we keep an open dialogue. And what I'm always in the CIO Council doing is I'm in listening mode in the following manner. What are the pain points that are coming forward? Where are the gaps that are affecting adoption and the ability to implement? What are the blockers in our own world, in the bureaucracy part of the equation? So, how do we streamline ATOs? How do we address the tick architecture? These are all the things that I've been talking about for the last few months as things that we're tackling, because agencies are coming forward and saying these are the things that keep us from getting there.
And then, for instance, the tick architecture, I've had several conversations with CIOs, especially the ones with worldwide expansion. State Department is just one example. They want to meet it. They see the importance, but again, it's like, okay, how do I find the right balance? So
it's the right capability, but it's the wrong architecture. And you spoke about architecture earlier. Because things have changed so dramatically, and this was done 7 or 8 years ago, you should just change the approach. The idea is correct, and the capability and the security posture is correct.
And the big differentiator, of course, is our conversation about transformation and cloud. This has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so I always like to get away question. I started on this side of the table with Rod to begin with, so we're going to start on that side of the table with Angie. So Angie, if we have this conversation again in a year, 2, 3 from now, what's IT transformation going to look like? What's it going to mean from where you sit in the industry?
Yeah, so it's probably one of the things I love most about being in IT and technology is it constantly changes. So, I expect the whole voice control to be part of our everyday business. Walking into a conference room and telling whether it's Alexa to set up the conference room in a particular way absolutely is going to be something that everyone is implementing. Internet of Things. Every person has probably many, many devices that connect via either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and our businesses are not going to be any different. And so making sure that we're securing them and we're incorporating them in a way that not only just puts the technology as part of our enterprises, but actually drives our organizations to be more efficient, to operate better, and in the end, deliver better critical citizen solutions.
Margie, 2, 3, 5 years from now, what's our conversation going to look like?
Well, I'm excited about the art of the possible here. Obviously, we're looking at AI and the different uses of AI in the future. That can be so game-changing. In addition, we've been talking about cybersecurity and high transaction volume mission spaces like census, et cetera. That expectation would be that we would be able to use technologies and approaches like blockchain. You know, maybe we start looking at certain things that that are a little bit out on the edge right now, but could be where we end up in 2 to 3 years. So always being conscious of that is important.
All right. Dave, what's GSA going to look like?
I'll talk in very practical terms this time. So I see significant reuse and maximize use value through the use of shared services across the federal government. And I see significant open technologies so that the citizens who make investments through agencies to provide services back to them are making that investment once, and it's being used again and again and again throughout the federal enterprise. So.
All right, Rod, take us home.
So here's what I would say. I like what John Chambers talks about when he talks about some of his successes and some of the things that he wished that he had looked at a little bit more closely. And I think it all boils down to being agile, moving quickly. He said that his greatest successes are moving as quick as possible and towards the market outcome. But he said some of his biggest regrets also were moving too quickly. Now, what he means by that, though, is you really, really have to be agile. You have to move quickly in order to meet your customers' needs. But on the backside, you need to have in place the processes, procedures, standards, repeatable processes that allow you to do that in a successful way. And I think that's what we need to be looking at in the federal government. We need to be moving quick, but we've got to have that back end standards, policies, and procedures to make sure that we do it in the right way.
All right, excellent. This has been a great conversation, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to the panel discussion, Maintaining the IT Transformation Momentum, sponsored by Leidos on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. I'd like to thank my guests today, Angie Heisey, the Civil Group President for Leidos, David Shive, the Chief Information Officer for the General Services Administration, Margie Graves, the Acting Federal Chief Information Officer, and Rod Turk, the Acting CIO at the Commerce Department. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Leidos.
On behalf of Federal News Radio, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you qualified for continuing education credit, you will also receive an email with your training certificate. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.